It does seem hard to believe how standards have changed since the Victorian times. We now have larger kitchens compared with what the Victorians had, and the pantry or larder now rarely exists. This was a cupboard, or sometimes in bigger houses a small room, which was used for storing food and is remembered as a cooler area. We understand the name or the slang term of larder came from meat being covered in fat to preserve it. Now rarely found in its original format, the modern day equivalent is a utility room, and in case you were interested, the term pantry is meant to come from the French or Latin word relating to bread, meaning it was a bread store. It could be argued that as refrigerators came in, larger Victorian houses tended to have a few sculleries, which is another term you may come across. These were small kitchens or rooms at the back of a house, typically located near or connected to the main kitchen, and were primarily used for labour-intensive work associated with food preparation and cleaning. Probably the main change in Victorian housing was moving to using a tin bath or tub. Before this, you would use a washstand with a basin in it. It wasn't until the 1880s that the more expensive houses started to have dedicated spaces for washing, which became known as bathrooms. Although the UK patent for a flushing toilet was granted in 1775 to Alexander Cumming, the term WC, short for water closet, became more widely associated with toilets after Joseph Bramah patented an improved design in 1778. We came across, whilst doing our research, the Victorian Turkish bath, and also something we hadn't heard of, a hot air bath, which was said to originate from Ireland and was often incorrectly known as a Turkish bath. These baths were popular during the latter part of the Victorian era and during the Edwardian era up until the First World War. There was even a committee formed in 1844 for promoting the establishment of baths and washhouses for the labouring classes, which became the Public Baths and Washhouses Act of 1846. Here's a funny fact for you. We did have a lady once say to us she had slept in the bathroom, which we literally thought meant she slept in the bathroom. However, when we chatted to her further, she explained that it used to be her bedroom and it had been made into an internal bathroom. The water closet, or WC, she said, had also been moved from the backyard into the house. Before we go further down this route, we will stop there. We are sure there is more information about this if you are interested, but adding in bathrooms and shower rooms to the Victorian houses when they didn't originally have them has created humidity, which in turn can lead to black mould and condensation, often visible to colder areas, such as high up the walls at corner points and also above windows, where there are sometimes timber lintels or metal replacement windows or even metal replacement lintels. When Victorian houses were first built, coal fires or wood fires were the main way to heat the buildings, with most rooms having a fireplace, although from what we understand, it was only hot coals that were used in the bedrooms rather than a full fire. Often there are signs of how the Victorian houses used to function in years gone by. There could be coal bunkers in various styles. Coal was stored in cellars. You can often see a circular cast iron lid to the front of the property, which is where the coal would have been poured. Alternatively, coal deliveries were also often to the rear of the property, where there was a coal shed. Frequently, there was access via a passageway, also called a ginnel, with different names used in different parts of the country. For example, ginnel is northern. The amount of coal that was delivered could be substantial depending on the family's needs. We often find now the coal sheds at the back of the properties have been turned into bathrooms or used to enlarge a kitchen. No one worked from home years ago, so you needed to have good access for the coalmen and their frequent visits. The fireplaces in the Victorian era originally had back boilers within them. Most have now been removed and have been changed originally for a traditional heating system that stored water in a hot water cylinder. But between this, there was also a phase where you had heated independent boilers for each appliance. We rarely come across these, but they are still out there. We do come across in Victorian properties hot water cylinders which come in many forms. The older sort are uninsulated. These then became insulated in the 1970s and 1980s as we became more energy efficiency conscious. In more recent times, we have unvented hot water cylinders, which are used in modern homes which can be fitted into Victorian upgrades. If you haven't had one of these before, then it is often very good during the summer months, when you can just use the hot water from these. It is more common now to have a wall-mounted boiler that provides heating for the radiators and hot water for washing. These need to be vented to external air. Predominantly, we have come across some fitted in the kitchen or the utility room in a larger house. Sometimes we have come across them fitted in a bedroom, which is not ideal not only due to the noise made, but sometimes it is a cost factor. Utility bills in our lifetime seem to have gotten more and more costly. By this we mean heating and lighting bills and water. We would always recommend that you get a few years, ideally 3 or more years, of their bills so you can understand the cost of bills you will get, particularly if the family is a similar size to yours or the house is being used in a similar way to how you think you'll be using the house. Whilst we are talking about heating, let's talk about radiators. During the 1970s and 80s and onwards, we have moved from a 12mm pipe to the radiators to microbore thin pipes, which is designed to work under higher pressures. However, we do find that there can be problems with these blocking up, and you do need to power flush them from time to time. We do sometimes find radiators are not fitted underneath the windows, but they are fitted internally in rooms, and this we believe can increase the chances of black mould and condensation as there isn't the same airflow. We haven't been able to find any studies in relation to this. Gradually, in the luxury housing sector, from about the 1880s, electricity was added, although from what we understand, it wasn't until the 1920s that most houses had electric. Electricity has had a longer history, with the 1840s telegrams being invented, which allowed communication which supported the growing railway system both nationally and then throughout Europe and the USA. Telephones began to be used widely in the 1880s. The iconic red public telephone boxes were introduced in the 1920s that you can still see in London and a few other areas, and they are now listed and protected. Other factors that would have affected your life include the replacement of horse-drawn trams in London, starting to be replaced in 1901 with electric trams. Cars and lorries started to use the roads. The first traffic lights came in 1933. Street lights started to be used in London. Tottenham Court Road used electric lights in 1891, but they didn't become common until the 1920s. Godalming was the first town in Britain to receive a public electricity supply. Electric pylons were installed from 1928. National Grid, the electricity grid, began operating in 1938. So before electricity, lighting in houses was via gas lighting and little lamps and candles. Gas lighting being a lot more controllable, but was of course still dangerous. There were 2 types of gas used in Victorian times. The coal gas, which included a not very pleasant mix of ethane, carbon monoxide and sulphur. Then you had to keep the buildings well ventilated as it was highly inflammable. There was lack of regulations in years gone by and all sorts of problems came with it. Here's another interesting Victorian fact. We saw it written in the Country Life magazine that a Victorian lady fainting is likely to have been due to a lack of oxygen caused by gas lighting as much as an overly tight corset. Coal gas is said to have been used first in 1792. The Scottish engineer William Murdoch is credited with inventing it for lighting. The most practical use for coal gas was for lighting. This led to the establishment of gasworks and the use of coal gas for lighting. London became the first city to light its streets with gas. Natural gas started to take over in the 1960s and 70s in England, and there were also discoveries of large areas of natural gas or sea gas off the Norfolk and Yorkshire coast in the mid-1960s. It is said that some gas streetlights still remain in the Royal Parks in London. Electric has gradually taken over. Often in houses we find electric fuse boards from the 1950s and 60s that generally need replacing. Sometimes even the newer ones are worth replacing unless they have been made safer over the years. We generally use electricity a lot more than we used to, and as such often houses benefit from having additional socket points. Somewhere we discover more about the electrics is in the roof space. You are probably aware that many valuations by banks and building societies and lenders don't include looking in the roof space. As electrical components are expensive items to replace, it is worth making sure that any inspection you have also includes the roof space. Better still, if you can go along to the survey, then you can see exactly what they are doing and get a better understanding of their feelings and thoughts. Thank you for your time. If we can be of any help, please call us on free phone 0800 298 5424 or email help@firstassociated.co.uk. Thank you.